There comes a moment in life that feels strangely quiet. Nothing dramatic happens. No argument, no final goodbye. Just a pause. You look around and realize the people who once felt like home now feel heavy, not because they are bad, not because they hurt you openly, but because something inside you has shifted. And for the first time, you can no longer ignore the question, is this connection still helping me grow? That realization is unsettling. It feels like waking up inside a familiar room and suddenly noticing the walls are closer than you remembered. What once felt safe now feels limiting. What once felt loyal now feels like obligation. And you begin to understand something painful but honest. Not everyone who starts with you is meant to grow with you. This is one of the hardest truths to face. We are taught that relationships must be permanent, that family bonds are unbreakable, that friendship means endurance at all costs. We learn to associate letting go with failure, with coldness, with betrayal. But Stoic wisdom asks us to slow down and look more carefully. Because growth has never been about holding on blindly. Growth has always required discernment. The Stoics understood something most people avoid. Just as a gardener must prune healthy branches to save the life of the tree, we too must sometimes release connections that quietly restrict our becoming. And no, this is not about anger. This is not about cutting people off to feel superior or detached. This is about honesty, honesty with yourself, honesty about who you are becoming, and honesty about who still belongs beside you. On that path, ask yourself this, not defensively, but gently. Do the people closest to me encourage my growth, or do they keep me anchored to an older version of myself I have already outgrown? If this question feels heavy, you are not alone. Many reach this crossroads silently, torn between comfort and evolution, between loyalty to the past and responsibility to the future. And that is exactly why we are here today, not to judge relationships, not to rush decisions, but to bring awareness. Because freedom does not begin with action, it begins with clarity. So stay with me. Do not rush ahead. Do not search for quick answers. Let each reflection settle, because sometimes the most powerful change in your life begins the moment you finally see clearly what no longer fits. Clarity often arrives quietly, but once it is there, it refuses to be ignored. And one of the first things it reveals is this: some relationships do not hurt you directly. They do not attack you. They do not betray you. They simply stop you from becoming more. At first, it is subtle. You hesitate before sharing good news. You downplay your ambitions. You shrink your excitement, so it does not make others uncomfortable. You tell yourself it is maturity, that you are being humble, that not everyone needs to understand your dreams. But deep down, something feels off, because growth should not feel like guilt. A healthy relationship does not demand that you remain small to keep the peace, yet many people live exactly this way, slowly editing themselves to preserve bonds that no longer fit, not because they are weak, but because they are afraid of what growth might cost them. The Stoics warned us about this. Seneca believed that life is meant to expand through learning, through challenge, through courage. To remain stagnant is not stability, it is quiet decay. So when a relationship keeps you frozen in an older version of yourself, that is not loyalty. That is resistance to life itself. Ask yourself honestly, when you are around certain people, do you feel inspired to move forward, or do you feel the need to slow down, to stay the same, to avoid change? Because the people who truly care for you may not always understand your path, but they will never discourage your becoming. This is not about abandoning everyone who does not grow at your pace. It is about recognizing a pattern where your evolution is met with discomfort, sarcasm, or subtle dismissal, where your progress feels like a threat instead of a celebration. And that, quiet as it may be, is a warning sign. But growth suppression is rarely alone. It often walks hand in hand with something even more draining: emotional weight. Have you noticed how some relationships feel heavier the longer they last? Every conversation circles the same problems, the same complaints, the same unresolved frustrations. Drama becomes routine, negativity becomes normal, and without realizing it, you start carrying emotions that were never yours to begin with. Marcus Aurelius once reminded us, you have power over your mind, not outside events, but what happens when the environment you keep constantly pulls your mind off balance. When every interaction leaves you irritated, defensive, or emotionally exhausted. That is not connection. That is erosion. Negative emotions will always exist. Jealousy, anger, resentment. The Stoics never denied this. But they also never accepted a life where those emotions become the foundation of a relationship. Because when negativity becomes habitual, it stops being an emotion and becomes an atmosphere. And here is the hard truth. If being around someone consistently pulls you away from clarity, from discipline, from inner steadiness, then something must change. Not in anger, not in blame, but in awareness. This is where most people hesitate. They tell themselves it is not that bad. They rationalize, they endure. But Stoic wisdom teaches us something different. Endurance is not virtue when it slowly costs you your peace. So pause here, not to judge anyone, but to observe yourself. Notice where you feel lighter. Notice where you feel drained, because the body often recognizes what the mind tries to excuse. And once you see this clearly, another question inevitably follows. What happens when a relationship does not just drain your energy, but begins to control your direction? When a relationship begins to drain your energy, it rarely stops there. Over time, something deeper starts to happen. Your direction shifts, not because you chose a different path, but because someone else slowly began steering. Control rarely arrives loudly. It does not always look like commands or obvious dominance. More often, it comes disguised as concern. You are changing. Is that really necessary? Do not you think you are overdoing it? Small comments, repeated often enough to make you doubt your own instincts. At first, you explain yourself, then you justify. Eventually, you stop bringing things up at all. And that is when you should be alarmed. Because the moment you feel the need to shrink your truth, to keep a relationship intact, you are no longer choosing freely. The Stoics were uncompromising about this. Epictetus stated it plainly. No one is free who is not master of himself. Freedom, in the Stoic sense, was never about doing whatever you want. It was about owning your choices, your thoughts, your direction, your life. So ask yourself, are you making decisions based on your values or based on how someone else might react? Do you pursue what feels right for you or what feels safest within a relationship? Because when fear becomes the compass, autonomy quietly disappears. Manipulation does not always demand obedience. Sometimes it simply rewards compliance and punishes independence, affection when you conform, distance when you assert yourself. Over time, your nervous system learns the pattern, and without realizing it, you begin self-editing, not to grow, but to avoid conflict. This is not harmony. This is conditioning, and Stoicism rejects it entirely. A healthy relationship does not require you to surrender your agency. It does not ask you to hand over your identity in exchange for belonging. True connection leaves you intact, stronger, more grounded, more yourself. If you find yourself constantly second-guessing, walking on invisible lines, measuring every word, pause. That discomfort is not weakness. It is awareness knocking. And here is the quiet truth most people avoid. If a relationship requires your freedom as the price of entry, it is already costing you too much. Letting go of control or being controlled is not cruelty. It is self-respect. It is choosing to live as the author of your life, not a character in someone else's expectations. And once autonomy is compromised, another fracture soon follows. One that strikes even deeper: respect. When autonomy is slowly taken away, respect is never far behind. At first, it does not look like disrespect. No shouting, no obvious cruelty, just small signals. Your opinions are brushed aside. Your feelings are minimized. Your boundaries are treated as inconveniences. And each time it happens, you tell yourself it is nothing. But respect does not disappear all at once. It erodes, quietly, the way water wears down stone. Not through force, but through repetition. The Stoics understood this deeply. They believed that dignity is not granted by others. It is something you must actively protect. Marcus Aurelius wrote about guarding one's inner citadel, the core of self-respect, reason, and virtue, that no one should be allowed to violate, because once dignity is compromised, every relationship becomes unstable. Ask yourself something important. Do you feel heard or merely tolerated? Are your values acknowledged or repeatedly dismissed? Do you leave interactions feeling steady or subtly diminished? Because love without respect is not love. It is dependency wearing a softer name. Many people stay too long at this stage, not because they do not see the problem, but because they hope respect will return. On its own, they wait, they excuse, they endure. But Stoic wisdom is clear here. Endurance is not virtue when it requires self-betrayal. There is nothing noble about remaining in a space that slowly teaches you to accept less than you deserve. Respect is not something you negotiate endlessly. It is something you either share or you do not. And when respect is missing, no amount of history can replace it. This is where values enter the conversation. Because a relationship that lacks respect will eventually ask you to compromise who you are. At first, it is subtle. You stay quiet instead of speaking honestly. You agree when you do not. You tolerate behavior that conflicts with your principles, not because you have changed, but because resistance feels exhausting. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, you begin drifting away from yourself. That is the real danger, not the loss of the relationship, but the loss of alignment between your life and your values. The Stoics warned against this above all else. They believed that no external bond, family, friendship, or love was worth the price of inner integrity, because when you abandon your values, you do not just lose direction, you lose yourself. So pause here, not in anger, not in judgment, but in honesty. Ask yourself, who am I becoming inside this relationship? And more importantly, is this someone I respect? Because the moment a relationship requires you to betray your own worth, to keep it alive, it has already crossed a line. And once values begin to erode, another illusion often takes their place: hope. When values begin to erode, the mind searches for something to hold on to. And that is when illusion quietly steps in, not as a lie, but as hope. Hope sounds innocent. Hope says, they did not mean it. It is just a phase. They will change. It was not always like this. And the most dangerous one of all, if I stay patient enough, things will go back to how they used to be. But the Stoics were wary of misplaced hope. Not because hope is evil, but because hope, when detached from reality, becomes self-deception. It keeps us loyal to what no longer exists. Here is the truth we often avoid. You are not staying for who they are. You are staying for who they used to be, or who you wish they would become, and that difference matters. Stoicism teaches us to see things as they are, not as we want them to be. Because reality, even when uncomfortable, is always more trustworthy than fantasy. Illusion feels comforting. Reality feels sharp, but only one of them can guide you toward peace. Ask yourself this carefully: if nothing changed, not next month, not next year, would this relationship still make sense? Would you still choose it if hope were removed from the equation? Because hope should never be the foundation of a relationship. Truth should be. Many people confuse patience with wisdom, but patience without discernment is not strength. It is delay. Delay of the inevitable conversation. Delay of the necessary boundary. Delay of self-respect. The Stoics believed clarity was an act of courage. To look directly at what is happening, without excuses, without nostalgia, without fear. They understood that clinging to illusion does not protect the heart. It prolongs its suffering. Here is a simple Stoic test. Does this relationship exist in reality, or only in your explanations for it? Are you responding to what is actually happening, or to a story you keep telling yourself to justify staying? Because once you strip away the story, what remains is the truth, and the truth is often quieter than the excuses we build around it. Letting go of illusion does not mean giving up on love. It means refusing to sacrifice your life to potential. It means choosing what is real over what is imagined. And when illusion finally dissolves, something else becomes visible. Balance, or the lack of it when illusion fades. What is left becomes impossible to ignore. The imbalance, at first, it does not look unfair. You tell yourself, I'm just more patient. I care more. They are going through something. So you give. You listen longer. You forgive faster. You adjust yourself again and again. Until one day, you realize you are always the one adjusting. This is where many people misunderstand Stoicism. They think Stoic strength means endurance. That virtue means tolerating more. That being good means giving endlessly. But the Stoics never taught self-erasure. They taught balance. A healthy relationship is not transactional, but it is reciprocal, not equal in every moment, but fair over time. Support flows both ways. Care moves in both directions, and when it does not, something fundamental breaks. Ask yourself honestly, when you struggle, who shows up? When you speak, who listens? When you need space, who respects it? Because giving without receiving does not make you noble, it makes you depleted. There comes a moment in life. There is a quiet danger here. When you give too much for too long, you stop expecting anything in return, not because you don't need it, but because expecting feels unsafe. So you lower the bar. You accept crumbs and call it understanding. The Stoics would never call this virtue. They would call it confusion, because compassion without boundaries eventually becomes self-abandonment. Reciprocity is not selfish. It is how relationships remain alive. Without it, resentment grows silently, energy drains, and the bond turns hollow. Not because anyone is evil, but because the balance is gone. This is where clarity must replace guilt. You are not demanding too much. By wanting to be met halfway, you are not unkind for noticing the imbalance, and you are not wrong for asking yourself how long you can keep giving without being seen. The Stoics believed that how we live our days shapes who we become. If your relationships teach you to ignore your needs, to silence your discomfort, to keep giving until there's nothing left, then they are shaping you away from virtue, not toward it. And here is the hardest truth in this section. A relationship that survives only because you keep sacrificing yourself is not sustainable. It is slowly teaching you that your presence is conditional, that you must earn your place. By overgiving, that belief will follow you far beyond this one relationship, and that is why it matters. When imbalance goes unaddressed, it often leads somewhere even darker. Abuse of power. When imbalance remains unresolved, it doesn't stay neutral, it escalates. And this is where Stoicism draws a very clear line. Abuse, whether emotional, verbal, psychological, or physical, is not a misunderstanding. It is not a phase. It is not a personality trait. It is a violation. The Stoics believed deeply in human dignity. They taught that every person possesses an inherent worth, one that must never be surrendered, no matter the circumstances. So when a relationship instills fear, controls behavior, or erodes self-respect, Stoicism does not ask you to endure. It asks you to protect yourself. This is important. Leaving an abusive situation is not an act of anger. It is an act of reason. It is choosing virtue over attachment. Epictetus reminded us, that while we cannot control the actions of others, we are always responsible for how we respond, and sometimes the most virtuous response is distance. But abuse is not the only breaking point. Sometimes the damage comes from something quieter, the collapse of communication, when words no longer build bridges, but only deepen distance, when conversations turn circular, defensive, exhausting, when understanding feels unreachable, no matter how carefully you speak. This is not simply poor communication, it is disconnection. The Stoics valued dialogue, clarity, and mutual understanding. They believed that reasoned conversation was essential to any meaningful bond. So when communication fails consistently, despite patience, honesty, and effort, it signals something fundamental. The relationship is no longer a shared space, and here is the Stoic distinction. Most people miss. Trying is virtuous, forcing is not. You are responsible for speaking honestly. You are not responsible for making someone listen. When communication becomes one-sided, when your words are ignored, dismissed, or weaponized, continuing to explain yourself is not persistence, it is self-neglect. Stoicism never glorified suffering. It taught resilience. Yes, but resilience is not submission. There is no virtue in staying where your voice has no weight. This is the line Stoicism never asks you to cross, to sacrifice your safety, your dignity, or your inner stability for the sake of preserving a bond. No relationship, no matter how long, no matter how close, is worth that cost, and recognizing this does not make you cold, it makes you clear, because clarity is not cruelty. Clarity is respect for reality. Once this line is seen clearly, the final question becomes unavoidable. Does this relationship bring peace? Or does it constantly disturb your inner stillness? Peace, acceptance, Stoic closure. Peace is not something you stumble into by accident. It is something you protect with awareness and difficult choices. The Stoics believed that inner tranquility is not a luxury. It is the foundation of a well-lived life. Without it, success feels empty, relationships feel heavy, and even joy feels fragile. So when a relationship consistently disturbs your inner stillness, when it leaves you anxious, defensive, or quietly exhausted, Stoicism asks you to pause and observe, not with emotion, but with reason. Ask yourself, after being around this person, do I feel more grounded or more unsettled? Do I feel clearer or more confused? Do I feel closer to who I want to become or further away? These questions are not accusations. They are measurements, and Stoicism is a philosophy of measurement, of seeing clearly. What strengthens the soul and what weakens it? Sometimes the answer is communication. Sometimes it is boundaries, and sometimes the most honest answer is distance. This is where acceptance enters. Acceptance does not mean approval. It does not mean bitterness. It means recognizing that not every relationship is meant to last through every season. Just as nature sheds what no longer serves it, we too must allow certain connections to end naturally. The Stoics never feared endings. They understood that clinging to what has run its course creates more suffering than letting go ever could. Letting go is not a rejection of love. It is a refusal to live in conflict with yourself. It is choosing alignment over attachment. And here is the quiet paradox. The moment you stop forcing connections, life begins to rearrange itself, not always immediately, not always gently, but always honestly. You do not regain peace by waiting for others to change. You regain peace by choosing what aligns with your values, your dignity, and your inner stability. This is the Stoic way: to live deliberately, to choose wisely, to walk away, not in anger, but in clarity. So take your time, reflect, and remember, relationships are meant to support your life, not consume it. They should strengthen your character, not fracture it. And above all, they should leave you at peace with yourself. When the day is done, thank you for walking this path with me. If these reflections resonated, stay. More clarity awaits.